7.7, we're going to be solving equations involving inverse trig functions. So example 1 is supposed to be a basic example, and it says solve. Anytime it says solve, it's going to be talking about isolating a variable. Okay? So we want to isolate the variable, but in this case, they tell you exactly which variable to isolate. Solve for x means isolate x. So you need to know that. Solve for x means isolate x. Hopefully you already do know that because you all passed out for 1. So I'm looking at this equation and I'm trying to isolate x. So I will focus on x. You don't need to circle it, but you need to look at it and just see what's happening to x. There are some different things that are happening to x. I need to peel this onion, right? Peeling an onion, I'm taking off layers, and you have to take off the outermost layer. So if I'm going to get this x by itself, the first thing I'm going to have to do is divide both sides by 3. Divide by 3 to cancel out that 3. And so what you're looking at is y over 3 equals cosine 2x. We're peeling that onion. We want to get what x is. We're going to have to get rid of that cosine. And so we know to get rid of the cosine, we're going to do an inverse cosine. So let's do inverse cosine on both sides. Inverse cosine of cosine 2x is going to just be 2x. So what we have is inverse cosine of y over 3 equals 2x. I would use parentheses around that y over 3 just to be super clear about what's going on. Okay. So if I want to get x, the last thing I'm going to have to do here is divide by 2. I divide by 2 to get x by itself. And so at this point you can see that x is going to equal, it's not really standard to have a fraction on top of a fraction. So instead of saying divided by 2, I'm going to say 1/2 times. 1/2 times inverse cosine of y over 3. 1/2 times inverse cosine of y over 3. That's it. Solve for x, isolate x, got it. So let's look at number 2, says solve. So again, we're isolating a variable. This one is a little bit different because it doesn't have a y in it, but we're still solving, so we're trying to isolate the variable. So there's your variable x. We're trying to isolate that x, and we need to peel the onion. So can you see what the first move is going to be? Divide by 2. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but if you're like me, this arc sine is a little bit confusing. If you want to rewrite that as inverse sine, be my guest. I think we're all probably more comfortable with that term, inverse sine and arc sine. But either way, if we're going to peel this onion, if we're going to solve for x, the first thing we're going to do is divide by 2. So inverse sine of x equals pi over 2. If I want to isolate x, I have to get rid of this inverse sine. What's going to do that? Sine. Good. Let's take sine of both sides. Sine of inverse sine of x is just x. So x is going to equal whatever sine pi over 2 is. So we have sine pi over 2. Sine pi over 2, straight from the chart, equals 1. X equals 1. You know, and if you imagine the circle, here's pi over 2 up here, this angle, 90 degrees. We look at the point, the coordinates are 0, 1, and we know that sine is talking about the y coordinate of that point. And so there's your 1 right there. Y equals 1. I mean, x equals 1.